Any good podcast should have a catchy and engaging intro and outro. And one of the most important features in that intro and outro is going to be your theme music. In this video, I'm going to show you how to find the perfect music for your podcast and share a couple of tips and tricks about how you can incorporate music and sound effects into the rest of your podcast to make it sound super professional and engaging. First and foremost, I have to say, yes, you can find free, royalty-free music online to use for your podcast theme music. However, that does not mean that you should. If you've ever looked through free, royalty-free online music libraries like YouTube Studio's music library, for instance, then you've probably noticed that when it comes to free music, you kind of get what you pay for. A lot of these sound pretty generic and boring, and like you've probably heard them in a YouTube video 3 or 4 times already. Certainly not the caliber of music that you're gonna wanna use for your podcast that your show and your brand are gonna become known for. That's why I really recommend making the investment and paying for a license to use music that is going to represent your brand well, be catchy and fun, and that your audience is actually going to enjoy listening to. Speaking of licenses for high quality music, I'm excited to tell you all about the sponsor for today's video, and that is Artlist. When Artlist asked me to work on a video with them, I was super excited because I have personally been using Artlist for years, for my own videos and for client projects. It really is an awesome service, and I'm excited to tell you more about it throughout this video. So thank you to Artlist. In case you haven't heard of it before, Artlist is a library of really awesome music and cool sound effects that has a subscription model, so you can pay a yearly fee to have access to this incredible library full of awesome music that is made by independent artists. Unlike other popular online music libraries with a monthly fee, Artlist has a super groundbreaking licensing setup. So basically, you pay one fee and you can use the music and the sound effects in your YouTube videos, on your podcast, in your Instagram content, and in your clients' content. It's actually really cool just how much freedom this gives you. In other music library subscriptions I've had in the past, you have to submit your YouTube channel for approval, and then you're only allowed to use it on YouTube. Artlist lets you use this music everywhere. And the annual subscription starts at just $199 a year. But you can get your first 2 months free when you sign up with the link in my description. Anyway, we'll get into the specifics of how I use Artlist to find awesome music for my own podcast and for my clients' podcast a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about the 3 questions that you need to ask yourself when you're trying to find theme music for your podcast, because it's very important that you don't just pick the first track that you listen to. Question number 1, ask yourself, how would I describe my brand? Is it fun or serious or professional? Are you trying to come across as trustworthy or maybe relatable? Start writing down some of these adjectives that you would want your ideal followers or listeners to describe your brand as. This is going to help you get a sense of how you want to represent yourself through your podcast, and especially through your podcast theme music. Number 2, who is my audience? What kind of people are you trying to reach, and what kind of music would they like? For instance, if you're a serious news podcast that's trying to share the hardest hitting info about current events, then you don't want to use music that sounds super fun and upbeat and happy, because it kind of undermines the seriousness of your show. And at the same time, if you are creating a comedy podcast that is about friends chatting and sharing funny life experiences, then you don't want to use super sad and slow classical music because it just doesn't suit the vibe. Think about the kind of music that your ideal listener likes to listen to, and then if that type of music matches up with the theme of your podcast, then it's a perfect opportunity to find a track that is in that genre to use as your theme music, because not only will it line up with the type of content that your podcast is about, but it will also line up with the preferences of your listeners. Because you don't want to make an intro that everybody just wants to skip every single time they listen, right? You want to create an intro that is going to be fun and pump people up and get them excited for a new episode. The third question to ask is, what do I want people to feel when they listen to my podcast? Do you want people to feel hopeful, informed, uplifted, like they're having fun, or like they're learning something serious? Think about what kind of feeling you want to impart to your listeners, and you want to make sure that you represent that feeling in the music that you choose. The intro, after all, is the first thing that your listeners are going to hear when they press play on your podcast, so you want to make sure that it well represents the content that they're going to hear next. After asking yourself these 3 questions, you should have a whole list of adjectives and feelings, and these are going to help you when it comes to your search on Artlist. When you first open up Artlist, you'll notice that there are a ton of different ways that you can filter your music selections. This makes it so easy to find the perfect track for the feeling and the adjectives that you're trying to invoke with your intro and outro. When you click on mood, you can scroll through a bunch of different options like hopeful, uplifting, fun, groovy, and you can choose the ones that match up with the adjectives that you've already listed when you answered those 3 initial questions. If you have certain instruments that you like better or you think your audience would like better, you can select those, and you can also pick a genre. Then you can just start scrolling through and listening to tracks. Here are a couple tips for finding a track that is going to work well specifically as a podcast intro or outro theme music piece. First of all, you might want to try to find something that has about a 20 to 30 second build up into like a big drop or a chorus or some really cool kind of exciting moment. That way, when you're talking at the beginning of the podcast, you can kind of be giving an intro to what people can expect, and that whole time we're building up to that big moment in the music where you can pause your speaking, the music plays, and it just creates a really exciting mood about the start of your podcast. Something else that is helpful but not 100% necessary is finding a track that has like a 2 to 3 second sting built into it. What I mean by that is a short phrase of music that can kind of stand alone and that you can use throughout your episode for transitions between different parts of the podcast. I'll explain more about that later, but for now, just think about it in terms of finding a short section of the music that sounds pretty recognizable. This can be a part of the section that you use for your intro, or it could be another section of music. And the third thing, which is maybe obvious to some of you, but definitely very important, and that is that you probably want to find a track of music that doesn't have lyrics in it. Because if you play music with lyrics underneath somebody talking, then it's going to be kind of distracting and they won't be able to listen to you speaking as much because the lyrics are there. So try to find something that is just instrumental. One tip for doing this in Artlist is if you click on the little microphone icon in the top right-hand corner when you're scrolling through tracks, that is going to eliminate anything that has lyrics, and therefore you'll be able to listen to tracks that are totally just instrumental. Of course, when you find something that you like, you can just click that add to cart button and download it, and then you can pull it in to Audacity or whatever other editing program you want to use and add it to your intro and outro. I actually have a video about how to edit your intro and outro with music in Audacity, so go check that out up here next. But first, I've got a couple bonus tips for editing music and sound effects into your podcast to make it sound super professional. The first thing is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the sting in any kind of music track that you find. You can create really seamless transitions between different sections of your podcast that feel a little bit more natural if you add a little short piece of music or a sting in between them. To kind of clarify what I'm talking about, this is the sort of thing that you see on news shows when they go between segments, or like on Hannah Montana when there's all the like, oh, yeah. That is like a sting, and it just helps you transition from one scene to the next. So you could use these if you go from like introducing a guest to the actual interview section, or if you are quickly dipping out of an interview to do an ad read, you could use that music as a transition between the ad and the actual podcast. There's a lot of really great applications, and I find that using this just makes the whole thing feel that much more polished. Or if you don't want to include a little bit of music as your transition piece, you could use a sound effect like a click or a whoosh or something like that to bring you between sections of the podcast. And Artlist also has sound effects. As you get better at editing and you practice this more often, being able to build in more complex sound design in your podcast is a really great way to make it more engaging and to sound more professional. So if you want to start adding really awesome music and high quality sound effects to your podcast, then check out Artlist today by clicking on the link in my description. You can get a free trial and try it out for yourself, and I'm sure you will find that it is more than worth it. If you are in the beginning stages of your podcast journey, then you're not going to want to miss this in-depth playlist that I made about everything a beginner podcaster needs to know to record, edit, produce, plan, and launch a new podcast. Seriously, this is like an online course, but for free. So go check it out. As always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Artlist for sponsoring this video, and I will see you over in this playlist. Okay, bye.